over the next 2 years, crypto is going to become a huge thing again. If all that crypto is a casino, then it's just less exciting than what it could be. Play to earn is still something that hasn't been quite figured out yet. In the next 12 to 18 months, a lot of tech companies are going to want to get involved with crypto again. People are going to start having crypto in mobile games all the time because the relationship is so symbiotic. It's so much easier to build a Ponzi, but the ambition that we have is to...
Hey, we'll get right back to the podcast, but first I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Vertex Protocol. Vertex is a cutting-edge decentralized perp exchange that brings you the best of both worlds. With its lightning-fast order book model, Vertex offers precise price discovery and minimal slippage. Take advantage of cross-margin trading to optimize your capital and trade the most popular assets like Pepe, Doge, WIF, Memecoin, Eigenlayer, and more, all with leverage. So why wait? Dive into decentralized trading today. Visit vertexprotocol.com to learn more. Trade smarter, trade with Vertex. We'll start off this podcast the same way we always do. Who are you and what do you do?
Yo, my name is Seb. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Sophon, which is a blockchain that focuses on consumer entertainment. And previously, I was at Matter Labs, the creators of zkSync.
Phenomenal. So I would love to start off with a bit about the name of your company. So what is Sophon and how does it relate, if at all, to what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so there's not a huge story here. Sophon is from the three-body problem. It's one of the characters or species, if you want, that's in the three-body problem book, and obviously the show that Netflix made about it. The designer that we were working with, who's an in-house designer to come up with the Sophon Brand, etc., spent a lot of time living in China, and China and Asia is a region that we wanted to capitalize on as well. And we just kind of decided to go with the name and build from there. There's not a huge amount of thinking behind it. We just thought it was cool.
Yeah, and I know brand and design is a big part of your company as well. So we can get into that in a little bit. But thanks for the context. So tell me about Sophon. What is it? What problems are you guys solving in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in this space for a while, and I realized that there's a lot of, we've been building tech for a long time. And building infrastructure for a long time. And at a certain point, and I think that moment is now, the infrastructure becomes good enough for us to start to care less about the underlying tech and care more about the end product and the personality and the soul of what we're building. A lot of generalized chains are quite neutral. They just kind of build out the infrastructure and expect all kinds of builders to come and whatever sticks, and that's it. And they try to be ETH aligned, or if you're in like a different ecosystem, aligned to maybe like some core values, but that's it. And the thinking was that, well, now that things are getting easier to build on, there's going to be a lot more value in creating an end product that actually has a very specific niche or a very specific personality or brand that we want to align with end consumers with. And the problem was that in crypto, very crypto native audiences are not growing that rapidly anymore, specifically to barriers of entry, the very specific crypto native culture. So we're thinking, what can we do to go beyond this? Like, how's the next generation of users going to come on chain? And these are in particular people who are not super crypto native, obviously, and not super early adopter, like tech forward, right? And you have to reimagine completely how these people function online based on the habits that they've developed using Web2 products, right? Things have to be snappy. They have to be easy to use. The user experience has to be quite defined. And we felt that there was a gap in the market for this.
Interesting. So like a couple of things here. First of all, do you have any kind of like Web2 inspiration or products that are kind of like skeuomorphic to what you guys are trying to create at Sophon in terms of this platform?
Yeah, definitely. So one of them, this is like a very generic answer, but that we take a lot of inspiration from is going to be Apple. But in the way that Apple's a tech company, right? But that's driven completely by design. Most tech companies are just driven by tech, right?
Right.
But Apple was completely built by, and those are the principles we care about. And Apple was really built by thinking, okay, what does the end consumer want? How does the end consumer interact with tech? And then build design around that and reverse engineer the rest, which is a harder thing to do, right? Another company that from a Web2 perspective, that I take a lot of inspiration from is Revolut. So I know it's not really big in the US, but in Europe, it's like the fastest growing bank, I guess. Like most of, people between the age of 20 and 40 or even 50 use Revolut now. And the fact that they've created a completely seamless banking experience without ever having to open a physical branch, everything's on your phone in a short number of years, is pretty incredible. And again, all of this is done through an intense focus on product design, user experience, and basically understanding how people behave with tech today, and then reverse engineering things to make it, because banking is a very difficult thing to put just on your phone, right? And that's kind of the inspirations we have, is understanding how general retail functions, what their habits are, how they've been trained to react to the intuitiveness of Web2 design or mobile design, and then reverse engineer that to bring it to crypto. Because obviously the problem with crypto is, if you look at Web2 products or typical tech products, they iterate very slowly in their design. Like they just tweak things here and there. And crypto just kind of comes out of the blue and says, throw that book out of the window. You're now self-custodial. You're in charge of your own finances and everything. Just relearn all of this stuff. And if you can't do it, then you shouldn't be using crypto, right? You have to download your MetaMask,
right?
All the dApps and
it's almost hostile to users in a way.
It's okay for early adopters, right? Because people are willing to take the pain to learn, they're curious, etc. And that's for people like you and me. But if you expect this to grow to hundreds of millions of people, you need to make it far simpler, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen.
So one thing that I talked to Cami from Berachain on this podcast, and she talked about thinking about Berachain almost as like this designer experience where the culture drives it. Drives kind of adoption of the chain itself. Do you think that there's any parallels to there with Sophon in any way? Is it culture? Yeah. Is it product design?
I think it's both. So I think Berachain is probably the best example so far this cycle of community building within the crypto native crowd. Right? They've built a very strong culture, very left curve, very degen, and hence with that crowd, they've been able to assimilate a lot of people, right? But if you're thinking about the wider number of people in the world who are going to come on chain, you need to be a bit more neutral. I think a good example is the App Store from Apple. So it's an incredible, if you think about if you scale back and look at the App Store, it's a product that Apple created, which allowed millions of developers to build apps and ship out apps out of, right? And then access end customers. And no matter what you would ship on the App Store itself is never judged. Like you could sell a fart app on the App Store that just makes a farting sound, which is retarded. But nobody would ever be like, oh yeah, Apple shipped that. That's stupid, right? And I think that division is very important to have. Then when we engage with consumers, there's different ways to do it. You can be kind of try to appeal to everybody, more soft and fuzzy, or you can try to be a little bit more sector specific. Maybe there's certain areas of arts, culture, fashion that you want to vibe with, and that's also possible. So for Sophon, the idea is to start neutral and then push more into areas that are defining culture.
Mm-hmm. So that takes us a little interesting to me, this idea of like ambivalence to what is on your platform. Because when I go into the Sophon app, I see a very highly curated experience. So I see, there's different categories, right, that you guys have selected. You have selected very specific verticals to operate in. The entire package is incredibly kind of like Sophon branded versus emphasizing the brands of necessarily the products within or the applications within. So how do you see this kind of is
Yeah,
that
the
conflicting in any way?
Sophon brand. So the Sophon brand is very present, and I think it's very visually pleasing. It's very beautiful, but it was designed in a way to not alienate any kind of user, right? Like I think you can send the Sophon website or the Sophon application to most people who've never used crypto before, and most people will tell you, "Hey, this looks interesting. I want to know more." Right? It looks visually because you got to think about it. Crypto, everything is consumed in a screen, right? Web2 products, if it's Nike, Adidas, whatever, you know, people are wearing the clothes. You can go to a shop, sports, like an athlete is interacting with this brand. Everything in crypto is completely consumed through a screen. So you have to really, really think about how you present things visually to the end user. And for us, is like, how do you create a strong brand, but that doesn't push people away? And yeah, then with regards to the ecosystem, one of the big decisions we made is to launch Sophon permissioned, right? A lot of um, a lot of people in the ETH community want to be completely unpermissioned, right? Which is normal, I guess, for maxis. You want anybody to be able to launch things on your chain, etc. But for me, because the end consumer and new folks in retail are who I want on board, their safety matters the most, right? You don't want people getting rugged on your chain. That's a bad look. So the idea was like, okay, only teams that we decide to work with will launch, and then we'll fully put our backing, we'll push them as hard as we can.
Right. Yeah, and having the kind of like the it entails an investment on your end, right? Of like, we have done the due diligence here, we believe in this product ourselves,
Yeah.
and thus
Yeah.
it creates kind of like it's like a mall or something that vets, it's making sure
Exactly.
it's
That's a
protecting the
great way
customer.
to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Interesting. And then the other component that I think is unique is about you guys, or one of many really, is this idea of like tech as product experience and design as well, where you guys are kind of like a tech platform first, but where, previous kind of hard tech products companies in the crypto space have been incredibly tech focused, and anything to do with UX is often a complete afterthought. You guys really take branding, product, very, very seriously. And it's the most evident thing that happens when you kind of interact with your ecosystem, even interacting with your social channels, things like that. So it almost makes me think that there might be this new evolution and this new wave of crypto coming, where people are realizing that product and design and engineering has to integrate on a different level to be successful.
Of course. I mean, if think of like the most successful Web2 tech companies in the US, right? Netflix, Airbnb. Nobody says, I'm going to log on to AWS to use Netflix today, right? No one says,
Exactly.
I'm gonna go log into my Google Cloud account to book an apartment somewhere. No, they're just built on tech which works well and which serves its purpose. And funny thing is, between something like AWS and Google Cloud, etc., the nuances are quite small, right? But between the different tech stacks that you can build in crypto, there are differences. And we use a tech stack which is a ZK stack, which has native account abstraction that's built completely into the protocol. It allows us to build these custom paymasters, which we have now to sponsor gas for users. Like, there's a lot of flexibility, and we just try to maximize everything we do on that tech stack, like use all of the advantages. And but then, yeah, it has to be about what the end consumer sees, what the end product looks like.
Right. And what that is, at least today, is, you enter the application and you see a host of products that you can use. So I want to talk a little bit about those. What is that ecosystem, and how does it relate to Sophon, and how do these products relate to each other, if at all?
Yeah. So we kind of came up with a number of different categories. And the idea was, when we soft launched the chain, which was at the end of December, let's try and have one or two applications in each category that we can work very closely with. So most ecosystems, when they launch, they want to have 100 dApps building with them, right? They want to have this huge ecosystem map. But the truth is, most of the time, what carries the velocity of a chain is only a couple dApps, right? Like the top
Right.
5% account for maybe 95% of volume. So for me, it was let's work very closely with core partners, help them on board over the course of the next couple months, and then also build infrastructure in-house that people can use in the future to launch stuff off of. So to answer your question, right now we focus on things like entertainment, which could be gaming, which could be social entertainment. Obviously, there's a big focus on AI, where our partnership with Aether comes in. We have a ticketing company. We have a social finance company called Mirai. Some games, yeah, number of different things. And then the idea for all of this to link in the future is we're building out a loyalty program, which we can talk a bit more about later, but that's going to kind of like tie all these things up together.
So take me through the kind of onboarding flow. Is a user coming to Sophon? Is a user coming to the application?
So for the time being, because obviously we're still a small team and these things take time, the user goes to Sophon at XYZ. There's an ecosystem portal like you would have with any other network, right? And then they get redirected. But that's not at all where I want us to be. The vision, the dream that I have is kind of it's a combination of Facebook and Steam. What I think was brilliant about Facebook was that you had one account, you had one user experience, one place to go as a user, but you could do so many things, right? You could sell your bicycle, you could play games like Farmville, you could socialize with your friends, organize events, and all of this was happening in one homogeneous place. And then for something like Steam allows game developers to launch things out of. You could have a marketplace. And again, you're kind of like making this homogeneous user experience that ties all these things together. And the idea for Sophon is to get to this stage, right? Being mobile friendly as well and having a basically one-stop shop. I think the example of a mall you gave is incredible. That's exactly where we want to get. But it has to be, again, a mobile-first experience that we can house all of these applications in.
Yeah, something that I think is frustrating to new users is the idea that with every kind of app or experience in crypto, it's a new flow. And even two similar apps, maybe two similar DEX, as a DEX on Solana or a DEX on Ethereum, has a different flow. But in Web 2, we're accustomed, Facebook is a great example of this, or Amazon, right? I understand the checkout flow when I'm going through Amazon. I understand, or when, to go back to the mall example, when I go to a mall, I understand I walk through the mall, I see the store, I walk in, I interact with the merchandise, and then I go to the checkout. And it's all, skeuomorphic in the same way. And I think a lot of what makes crypto hard to interact with is the fact that those experiences are very inconsistent, and we haven't kind of settled on these like cultural flows of how you interact with a specific product.
Yeah, definitely. And crypto gives you the opportunity to have composable applications, right? Which is such a big power for crypto. And right now, the only vertical that's truly utilizing this is DeFi, right? Like there's a lot of composability that happens in DeFi. It's financial Legos, which is amazing because that's the whole point. But I still think, and I was in charge of DeFi in my previous role, but I still think it's far too complex for like general retail to adopt, right? It's there's too many risks, that sort of thing. But it just highlights that composability is there to be leveraged, and I think with other things we can definitely do it.
That's interesting. So like, are you referring to the idea of like some type of composability in the entertainment consumer space, and what would that look like?
So to me, play to earn is still something that hasn't been quite figured out yet, right? Like people looked at play to earn with Axie, things like this, and they kind of wrote it off because it looked like a Ponzi a bit, right? Or there had to be a loser in order for there to be a winner. But I think it just hasn't been done correctly yet. But gaming and crypto, executed right, has such a symbiotic relationship. Like there's so much potential there that's all we need to get right, really. There's a couple games that we're working with which are mobile games, games that have been on the Apple Store for a number of years. They've done hundreds of millions of downloads, several million monthly active users who are now pivoting the game, just the back end, to use crypto. And I think, we're going to go to market with them in the next quarter or so. I think all you need is for one or two of these games who already have PMF anyways to be successful with crypto in the back end, and then everyone is going to start to change. Like you have a new regulatory landscape that's going to start this year in the US. You have a very crypto-friendly administration that's kicking things off next week. I think people are not pricing in the next 12 to 18 months. A lot of tech companies are going to want to get involved with crypto again, the same way that this was in 2021, right? This will happen this year and next year for sure.
Do you think you guys are uniquely positioned to capture that kind of like tech Web 2 incumbent coming to Web 3 energy?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a few other teams in the space that are as well. It's not like we're the only ones, of course, but I think we have a team that understands the tech that we're building on very, very well, which is number one important because you need to be able to leverage stuff that you're building with. But more importantly, the team understands how consumers think, how they behave. And once you have that, you can kind of start building things for these people. Business relationships are easier as well. We obviously have a really big war chest as well. And that helps us being able to do a lot of business. So I think if you put those things together, it puts us in a great position. And I'm confident that there's a few other teams in the space who are doing the same. And it's our mission collectively to take crypto out of this very degen crypto native atmosphere and open it up so that way more businesses can come and use crypto.
Right. So I'd love to dive into this tech a little bit. You guys, what is Sophon, right? You talk about consumer, you talk about, you enter Sophon right now, it feels and looks like an application, and it is an application to some extent, but it's also a chain, an L1. How do you characterize this kind of new space that you guys are operating in?
Yeah, I think it's all about maximizing and leveraging the tech that we have. And the advantages that we have. And I think that native account abstraction, this was a hot topic for a number of years. But now's the time that people are really starting to look into everything that you can build that improves end consumer experiences. So a good example is, since we've launched, there is no gas on Sophon. Like you use Sophon, you just click buttons, everything just works, and the end consumer never sees a gas transaction. Now, obviously, there is gas, but it's being sponsored by us for the first quarter through a paymaster, right? This was pretty complex to build, but that's how it works. And then going forward, applications will be able to, or partner projects we work with, they'll be able to sponsor gas for their users, right? And I think, again, just changing the way that people, you don't have to have a pop-up all the time coming in your face. And like that's a huge barrier to entry for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of the Europe, US, sales tax debate. Europeans come to the US and they see sales tax and they're like, what? They go to the cash register and they say, what are you charging me for? And then Americans are used to this for some reason. It feels like crypto is used to this idea of gas for some reason. But I imagine it can be incredibly, I've experienced it. First of all, it's really annoying, right? When you're on a new chain and you don't have any gas and you got to figure out how to get assets over to the in the right place, but it's also just kind of like annoying. So the elegant, I do like the elegance of that, and perhaps in 10 years we'll say, why did we ever have the end user deal with the gas costs of these things? Yep. Interesting. And then I think there's an important part of your component tech stack that I'd like to learn a little bit more about that's called ZK-TLS. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, of course. So ZK-TLS is not necessarily something that's native for us, but it's something that we've put a huge amount of energy in. ZK-TLS it's essentially web proofs. I call it a social oracle. So it allows you to verifiably prove on chain things that are happening in the Web2 space, right? So you could, you could sign in with your Ticketmaster account, for instance, and link all of your purchase history. So what you've been, concerts you've been going to, things like this, and prove it verifiably on chain, but without releasing your data, right? And I think this is it's very slept on at the moment, which is why I've been pushing our team super hard to work on this, because I think it's such a massive opportunity. It's a potentially massive way to onboard first-time users. Imagine being able to tell your friend, hey, you've never used crypto before, but if you go to Sophon, you can log in and you just have to sign a message with your Spotify account or your Ticketmaster account, and there's going to be rewards waiting for you there. This is really important because zkTLS creates a new kind of data stream. Like I said, it behaves like a social oracle. And if you can get all of these people to log in a way and connect these new kinds of data streams on chain, you can then build new things on top of that, right? It uncovers a whole new narrative, a whole new meta. And I think it's incredibly exciting way to kind of vampire attack regular consumers from Web2 products.
Right, because kind of like the data is more valuable on chain and it's not even being utilized in other places. That's very, very interesting. Exactly. I've heard kind of like ideas about how to play with data, how to figure out how to get data on chain about consumers specifically, but I haven't ever heard it kind of illustrated in this interesting way. Plus, it seems like a huge project, a huge issue is this idea of privacy.
Yeah, exactly. But it shouldn't be. Privacy is a feature. It's not a product. And you had a number of different projects in crypto that were trying to build privacy as like a product and essentially had to sunset. Because you shouldn't make your user experience worse because you have privacy, right? Privacy is a feature. And the user experience should be akin to what you have in like a Web2 experience now, but you get it on top. And I think a great way of vampire attacking people from their current Web2 applications is to tell them, hey, you've got all this data here, sign it, nobody will see it, but there's all these things that you can do on chain thanks to it.
Right. So we talked a little bit about the value prop of the tech, perhaps as it pertains to devs. If you were to kind of try to persuade a user of why Sophon is interesting or compelling, what would you chat to them about?
Yeah, I think that at the beginning it's going to be very much a storytelling exercise, right? Users are going to have. Users want to interact with applications, things like this, but overall, the more crypto becomes mainstream, the more there's going to be a brand, right? Branding is going to matter. The soul is going to matter. The same, you have the same thing with regular Web2 companies today, right? And I think that is an exercise which we're very, very good at, right? It's obvious from the way people are reacting to the Sophon brand online is very positive. They love the way that we've presented products to them, that there's such a focus on user experience, that things are just beautiful to use and very visually pleasing. And then it's all about the, like I was saying earlier, the portal that we have, the super app that we're building, and it's pushing things that people like to do. I think games is going to be a massive thing this year. People are going to start having crypto in games, in mobile games, all the time because the relationship is so symbiotic.
So one kind of counterexample to this thesis of I want to create beautiful, elegant, and compelling products is like Pump.fun, which is perhaps the most successful app over the last year or so, but it's disgusting. It's visually it's a terrible app. And I think maybe even the founders themselves would admit it. Yet it's created this massive success. Why are you taking the other side of this bet?
I think it's a good example. I mean, Pumpfun is probably one of the most, or maybe the most successful protocol this cycle, right? But it caters to an extremely crypto native audience, which is fine, right? Because that's where the money is at the moment. So that makes sense. But a lot of what the ambition that Sophon has is, yes, we have to cater to the existing crypto native audiences now, but we have to be forward looking. We have to think about the opportunity of the future, right? If you can have tens of millions of people coming on chain, how do you build so that they come to you and not to someone else? Because one thing I'm convinced of is over the next 2 years, with this regulatory landscape shifting, just crypto is going to become a huge thing again, right? It seems huge to us because we work in it, but to millions and millions of people in the West, in the East, it's going to become cool again. It's going to become curious again. It's going to become interesting again. In 2021, you had Eminem and Snoop Dogg doing a music video with their Bored Ape, right? You had, FTX for everything that they did, but still they were buying a football stadium. You had
Right.
Matt Damon. Matt Damon was doing ads at the Super Bowl for crypto. And this moment is going to, and everyone in America knew what crypto was and was excited about it. And that's going to happen again. 100% it's going to happen again. And it's just such a big opportunity to change the way that to be the place that people want to go because things look and feel like they're used to. Because Pumpfun is wildly successful, but again, everybody talks about this. It's a bit of a meme. Most people are losers there, right? Only a small number of people won.
Absolutely. Me too.
Yeah. I mean, the real winners are the founders, right? And they did an incredible job. But yeah, I think if all that crypto is a casino after all these years, and if it continues to be this, then it's just less exciting than what it could be.
What have been some of the hardest things about building out Sophon and the obstacles you guys have faced?
It's exactly the conversation that we're having now. It's so much easier to build a Ponzi or something that's a bit scammy, let's say in crypto, because you can go to market with it very quickly. There's a winner, there's an obvious loser, and then you move on. But the ambition that we have is it's much harder in crypto to build something that has much more fundamental long-term appeal to a wider audience that can onboard more people and then connect it with those folks. It's really not easy. And that I think is the biggest challenge that not just we face, but most people who are trying to onboard new users are facing in crypto, right?
I imagine too, you look at maybe DeFi or something that has kind of much more defined parameters, or, building out the first AMM, it was just kind of translating the math on chain or into Solidity. And you guys are building in a space that seems to have a lot more softer edges. And I imagine that could be challenging as well, as this kind of nebulous space around consumer and product.
It's also new, right? So we're also kind of going into the void, and you need to be trying things. Some stuff is going to stick, some stuff isn't going to stick, and that obviously is a challenge because you have a limited number of time, of resources, and at a certain point you need to make some bets.
Right. Talk to me about Sophon's node sale.
Yeah. So the node sale was a great community building exercise. It happened a bit less than a year ago, so at the end of the first quarter. And Aether, our partner, had just done what is the largest node sale still. They had raised around $100 million over the course of a month, let's say. And then we thought, we looked at that and we said, okay, it's a great way to kind of publicly raise funds again. It was like a new style of ICO, let's say.
Right.
But the more important thing is you're creating community before launching, right? You basically allow thousands of people to ape into your project in a semi-liquid fashion, let's say, and being long your project before you launch. The note sale for us happened over the course of a few weeks. There was a private sale and a public sale. The private sale was just because we had some large tickets to fill, so we had to spread them out. Otherwise, everybody coming into retail would not have had the same opportunity, and it was super important for the public sale to be having the same conditions as people in the private sale. If you have people in privates, if you have guys coming in with $1,000 tickets competing with guys with $1 million tickets at the same time on chain, they're going to get squeezed, right? So the idea was, let's take half of this sale and do it privately and allocate people correctly, and then let's take the other half and allow the public to come in and get the same conditions. We raised 21,000 ETH, which at the time was around 65 mil, from several thousand users, and they've been our core community ever since. Now, when we launched mainnet, people were able to then claim these what we call nodes. Technically, they're NFTs, they're ERC-721s, and start to perform work on the chain. We use Avail as our data availability partner, and we built this pretty sophisticated light client system that performs data sampling on the Avail network, so basically just securing the Avail network. And all of these node holders can then delegate their nodes, run these light nodes, so they're doing a service for Avail. And ultimately, when the consensus for Sophon decentralizes, probably this year, or that kind of depends on Matter Labs' roadmap, then they'll be able to validate the chain as well.
How much tech overhead will that involve, kind of being that, running the node?
So at the moment, if you're there's one centralized sequencer, right, for us, and then light nodes are very computationally light to run. You can run it on your phone or your browser. We built a whole user experience where the user can just claim their node and then delegate it, and they just start accruing rewards immediately. So again, the idea was, let's make the journey for the user here as easy as possible. These folks put money last year. We took 20% of a company, so 20% of total token supply as emissions over 36 months, and that's what people should be getting in return. But because it's our core community, my ambition was always to try and go beyond that. So all the partners we work with now who are going to have TGEs or who have tokens already, we always negotiate something like a token swap or an airdrop, and instead of getting it for our treasury, we redistribute it to node holders. And I always think back at Bored Apes last cycle, because if you had minted an original Bored Ape, they just kept you winning, right? Mm-hmm. You could then mint the mutant, you could mint the dogs, you got your share of ape coin, and they always kept the OG community winning. And that was a really good community building exercise, right? Because by the end, the OG guys had gotten so much value out of it. They were the biggest champions of that system, and that's your best marketing, right? So the idea is always to kind of like take these OG community holders on our side and just continue pushing value to them.
Right. So two other ways you're kind of pushing value to early adopters. The first one is Guardians, and then the second one is Sophon Points. Can you explain both of these systems?
Yeah. So Guardians are the node holders themselves. Mm-hmm. That's what we call them, and what they're accruing are Sophon Points. Maybe you mean Sophon Points in the context of our points farm.
Right.
Okay, good. So after we did the note sale, we also started a farming period where users on Ethereum, so on mainnet, could deposit different kinds of assets and farm for points. And that's where we accrued around north of 500 mil in TVL over the course of last year. We bridged all of that to Sophon when we launched, and users can continue to farm those points for another few months, let's say. Until then, we'll officially sunset that, and then once we launch the token, they will be convertible. Now, those Sophon points will be equal to tokens as well, but there's a lot of more things we can do with this. We can tie this into our loyalty program. I think the end thing is every network wants to have a community that you can then bring to projects that you work with, right? and you want to be able to prove this is my community, they're active. We we can get them involved in your project and XYZ reason.
So you hinted at a couple of things, but what are the next steps for Sophon? What are you guys going to be focusing on in 2025?
Well, one of the big steps is listing the token, which will happen relatively soon, and that's taking up a lot of energy at the moment. But yeah, but more broadly, it's really about building out this super app. It's building out our loyalty program. It's building out some native infrastructure that uses zk-TLS. Basically looking at all of the different areas that I'm bullish on, and then building out things in-house that can allow people to use Sophon. I have a fundamental belief that you can do as much BD as you want, and in some cases it can be very lucrative, but the true success of a network is defined by usually one or two applications, and typically it's applications that allow people to launch things off of. So you gave Pump as an example earlier. Like, if you want to launch a meme coin or a shitter, you go on Pump, right? And if you want to launch an AI agent, you're going to go to Virtuals. If you want to trade an NFT, you'll probably use Magic Eden or Blur. And every narrative, every meta, let's say, has a piece of infrastructure that then allows people to build stuff on top of. And I think that zk-TLS for us will allow, is a narrative that I'm double clicking on, and that I'm building infrastructure for people to launch things out of. I'm very bullish on this.
Right. With your approach, you mentioned this previously as well, this idea of like a few kind of key apps kind of making or breaking the chain. However, you guys are also operating in this way where you're really selective about who you want to work with. Is it possible Solana, got Pumpfun because they were willing to accept thousands of apps, or why do you think like the highly convicted route is the way to go?
So for me, because it comes down to protecting the end user. I think if the moment because of the nature of crypto at the moment, if you open up and are completely permissionless, you're going to have bad actors. And yeah, because the goal we have is getting new people on chain for their first time, I don't want to have the risk of people getting rugged or scammed or things like this.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to do things a bit more slowly in this sense. Have a user experience that's pleasant, have a place where your community feels safe. They can tell their friends to come and interact. And over time, especially because we're operating in a completely new frontier, we need to be dipping our toes in all of these different pools and then seeing what sticks.
So you're kind of giving the apps like a big head start by having the curated experience, by integrating the design, by making sure that there's no security risks.
Yeah. The other thing as well, which is important to note, is because we're going to be working with a lot of Web2 companies that are looking to rotate their business or their backend to using crypto, a lot of the times this requires quite a lot of partner solutions, right? A lot of partner engineering. And if you take 100 of those at the same time, you're never really giving them a good service, right? I would much rather have less applications off of the get-go, but where the relationship with Sophon is great, where all of the help that they need they get, and then they can just spin everything up and it works well, rather than having 100 or 200 guys coming at the same time. The service is bad, stuff is breaking. I won't name any names, but in my experience, because I have a pretty big network doing this for a while, some of the larger foundations who are trying to just onboard hundreds of projects, they typically get a very bad name for themselves, because it's always the same thing. They say, oh yeah, the BD team's great. They bring in a project, they sign them, it's all lovey-dovey, and then it's ghost town. And people end up leaving and going to another chain. You don't want that to happen, right?
Right. So being heavier touch kind of enables a more boutique and streamlined experience for the onboarding. What's the long-term vision for Sophon? Where you guys want to be in, 5-10 years?
We discuss this quite frequently internally, and what I tell the team is the ambition we should have is in a few years' time, we should be able to look back and there's 100 million more people who are using crypto, right? Or even more, let's say. And that Sophon is one of the main contributors to having onboarded all of those people. So if we can look back and we can say, hey, Sophon understood how end consumers think, and they built products, they built infrastructure, they built applications that those people wanted to use, and they helped bridge that gap, then we'll have been successful. Our mission will have been complete.
I think that's a great note to wrap up on. Where can people find you, learn more about Sophon, anything that should be on people's radar?
Yeah, people should go on sophon.xyz to read about Sophon. We do a lot of content publishing, which I think people will enjoy. We take a lot of, put a lot of effort into writing things in a very simple and digestible way to explain the different areas that we're working on. They should subscribe to our Twitter @Sophon and stay tuned.
Excellent. Well, we'll be watching, and we're excited to see the development of Sophon and how it plays out. So thanks so much for being here, Seb. We really appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack.